Well, I guess we'll just let everyone else sort of trickle in throughout our time together today. So before we go ahead and jump into things, I wanted to share a little bit about myself and David. So I'm Julia, and I work here at Springboard. And joining me today is David, one of our data science mentors and a data scientist and AI fellow at Fuse Machines. And I'm so excited to have you on today, David. And one more quick thing before we go ahead and jump into the questions. During the conversation today, feel free to submit any questions that you have either in the chat and the Q&A, as I'll be monitoring them the entire time. And so we can bring your questions in live or wait until the Q&A at the end. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So David, one of the most common things aspiring data scientists have questions about our portfolios. Why is it important to have a portfolio, and what purpose does it serve?
Absolutely, and thanks for having me again here today, Julia, and thanks all of you students and fellow data scientists in the making for being out here today on the webinar. One of the most important things I've seen as both an instructor and a mentor and a data scientist in the field is having projects available to showcase. And at Springboard, we call them Capstone Projects. These are part of your portfolio in the data science career track. And what they are is an example of your capabilities. So if you're doing a data science project, having that involved with Python and all the write-up and the material there, I think they're extremely critical to have, because when you're in the interview, it shows your real-world experience. So you can explain to an employer from A to Z the entire data science workflow, how you've been successful, and all the elements that might be asked of you during interviews.
Awesome. And with having a portfolio, I'm sure there's many different ways that you can showcase the different projects and experiences that you've had throughout your data science journey. So what would you recommend as an optimal format to showcase your portfolio in to recruiters, potential employers, or anything at all?
Sure. Well, every industry is unique in its own, and the data science industry has several tools that have become standard. And from using Jupyter notebooks for your code to using Markdown for your format, integrating these into one solution is very helpful for that interview process and for showing prospective companies and recruiters. I think GitHub is the best resource to showcase this. So if you're in the data science track on GitHub, you can set up your own repositories where it has full support for Markdown, which lets you format your reports. And you can also have all your code, your Jupyter notebooks, your R files, they can all be shared there. And in addition, as part of the portfolio, it's not only important to show the code and to show the Markdown files, but if you can make it a business case for it, you can make it presentable to an audience, that's really helpful. And two things I encourage all students to do. The first is to create a PowerPoint of sorts, right? You know, you have a 10 to 20 slides that summarizes it, so anyone can look at that PowerPoint or PDF and see what you've accomplished in the business case surrounding that project. And secondly, going the extra mile is creating a YouTube video of you doing the presentation. So when we finish capstones through the data science career track at Springboard, you'll be presenting to your mentor and getting live feedback on what you did great. And I always encourage students to go the extra mile and then self-record a YouTube video slightly longer where you walk through your code and your presentation and then save it. You can keep it as an unlisted video, have it available, and if a recruiter ever says, hey, I want to see an example of your portfolio or a project you've done, not only can you point them to GitHub, but you can also show them your personality and your presentation skills by sharing that YouTube link. So I have quite a few students who found those tips very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing all about that. I guess it's when it comes to portfolios, regardless of whatever industry or field you're trying to enter, it's just seems like it's a really great opportunity to be able to really express who you are and who this potential employer or even recruiter might be bringing onto their team. And so within a portfolio, how many different projects would you suggest be included? Is there like a sweet spot, a number of projects, or um, the different types of projects? How would you recommend going about deciding that?
So at Springboard for the data science career track, particularly, we have 2 capstones that students work on. So I like to say a minimum 2 projects in your portfolio. Often when I work with students and they finish the capstones and they're starting the job search, I say, why not start a third project if you could? And that could be using data sets on popular sites such as Kaggle, or using a passion project you're interested in, or partnering with a nonprofit or other organizations. The reason 2 and sometimes even 3 is a great number is because when you're doing these interviews, you want to have multiple projects you can talk about. If you're just talking about one project for a 30 to 60-minute interview, it doesn't give you enough material. So that's why it's great to have 2 or 3, because you could talk about the whole workflow, and ideally these projects work on different components of data science, right? Maybe one of your capstones is on NLP, another one is on supervised learning, maybe another one, if you get the third one, could be even using infrastructure, hosting on platforms like Amazon Web Services. And what's great about those multiple projects is they show the breadth of your capabilities for those recruiters.
Thank you for that. And following up a little bit, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly, but Sai asked, what is the ideal size of the project, as in small, moderate, or large scale, and time to be spent on each project?
That's a great question. And if you were involved in the Springboard data science career track, each project is really about how much you're willing to showcase, right? So I've had students who've accelerated through projects in 2 to 3 weeks, and some who've done really strong deep dives over a couple months. So it does depend. The unifying theme on any project is working through the entire data science workflow. So that's from discovering a problem you'd like to solve, identifying a data set, working through these data files, going through statistics and hypotheses, showcasing visualizations about what the data means, applying the algorithms that might be relevant for that problem, and then explaining the metrics and having the business case presentation. I think this exact structure, which we go through in depth in the program, is applicable to any problem, applicable to any challenge. You could showcase it in a PowerPoint. You could turn it into an app or a web app if you want to go that extra mile again. But following all those steps is great because it helps a recruiter understand your mental models and your methodologies, and understand that you're very structured and thoughtful in the steps you take to a project. So that gives you those extra points in the interview.
Got it. Again, so it's sort of reinforcing the fact of it's really up to the owner of the portfolio and how much they want to show about themselves to someone. And so with each different project or projects within your portfolio, are there any particular elements that should be included with them?
I think for every project, the key is that if a recruiter or someone who wants to hire you, or a startup is going to look at your link, it's important that what you share should be able to stand alone without you. In the competitive job market that we're here today, it's important that if you send the link, someone can look at it and understand the business case. They can read the whole problem. So I think the one area that often people can add more is that business case, is writing out those paragraphs. And in the data science, you can write that in Markdown. You can, after every single line of code, and you have your output, write a thoughtful interpretation. What's occurring here? What's the meaning of the analysis? How does it relate to your client or customer? I encourage all my students to do that, especially when you work on a project for a couple months and then you revisit it and you're like, what was this, right? You might not remember. And it's really helpful to document that all, because as you're going through the job searches, you want this to all be information top of mind. And rather than reinventing your capstone or your portfolio project from scratch, you can reread everything you've done. So all the methodology is available for you to apply for during those interviews.
Do these same sort of principles and what types of projects and what elements to include with each project, do they apply to career changers, or any special suggestions for them? This is a question that's in the chat, and being a little bit more specific for people who work in data warehouse projects.
So it's so interesting when you speak about data warehousing and that traditional technology. Where that's been moving, of course, is more the DevOps space and doing infrastructure with AWS, Azure, GCP, any of these platforms. You can still show it. Sometimes it's hard to simply show it, of course, in Markdown, because warehousing is more these databases. But that's why I also encourage recording the video. And if you're someone who wants to showcase the whole project, check out Docker, right? Docker, if it's new to you, is this platform that lets you host containers. So you could take your databases and all the tools and package it together and then make it public on Docker, connect it to GitHub, and make it available for those recruiters. I think no matter what type of job you're changing towards, data science, full stack, web development, creating apps, you can showcase all of that. And the more that you're willing to share with recruiters and be open to, I think it can only work to your advantage.
Awesome. I hope that answers your question. And so going back to projects and projects that you're including within your portfolio, is there any particular order you should have them in, for when someone is clicking around and looking through, or is there any optimal way to go and order your projects?
It definitely depends on the order, really depends on what message you like to convey and the strength of what you've accomplished. I believe that you should show your projects in order of most complex and most, advanced that they are. So if you have 3 capstones, the one that has the more advanced machine learning or the bigger scale you could show first, and then the others could follow. If you're going to show your projects on LinkedIn or in your resume, you don't need to show many paragraphs. You could put, 1 to 2 sentences and the link. This is the supervised machine learning model on credit default risk, and here's the GitHub link, right? It could be that simple to view. And even on your resume, most resumes, the golden practice is being 1 page. So if you could show each project as 1 line, you only take up 3 or 4 lines, so you have room to showcase everything there as well.
Great, awesome. And so I guess then keeping it short and succinct, and then providing additional information in the portfolio itself. Awesome. And so are there any other important factors to include or be conscious of when you're putting your portfolio together?
I think the #1 most important thing for a portfolio is having the business case available, right? Beyond using the algorithm, what is the end goal? Does it help a client save money? Does it help more users have accessibility? What does that look like? And whatever project you're working on, to consistently think about the business case. But not only that, think about how can you take your project and turn it into a consumer or enterprise facing product. So if you can make a web app, if you can make a mobile app, if you can make a container where then someone can spin up these algorithms and use them, you've added benefits to society. right? And that's how most open source projects got started on GitHub. A lot of machine learning and AI researchers were working on their degrees or their self-studies, and they created these repositories with new packages for Python or other languages. And because it didn't exist and that individual created it, sooner than later, other people tagged along, started supporting the projects, and they became what's known today as open source data science. So I encourage you, if you think, oh, there's not a dashboard for this, oh, there's not a plugin for this, is that something you want to consider creating? And if so, it can have a lot of value. Not just saying, I did this algorithm, but here's this dashboard that displays all the metrics and the direction the algorithm predicts these results, such as customers staying or leaving for healthcare providers. In addition to having a dashboard, it could even be, this is the algorithm that I finished and I've exported it so other people can access it. Or I've made my own Python package. It's not that everything you need to make is research or cutting edge per se, but to showcase that you're thinking of the full end process, you're thinking of the product as well. That's really meaningful, because on the job, when you work in data science or the data fields that you work in, you're often working with product teams and product owners. So you're not only touching the algorithm, but you're in meetings and helping make sure the flow is great for that workflow.
Awesome. And another question that I wanted to ask that we get from a lot of our students when it comes to portfolios is, how should you think about the portfolio review itself? So when you have your portfolio completed, you've applied to some jobs, you've caught the eye of a recruiter, and you start going through like the interview process, and it comes time to presenting your portfolio live in action to someone you want to get hired by. What are some tips that you have for presenting it?
Sure. So I think when you're presenting a portfolio to a recruiter, whether that's in person or on phone or video or however that phone screen looks like, start at the high level view. So if you did a project on credit defaults for different users at a company, don't suddenly dive in and tell everything about the project. Start with a high level. One of my capstone projects was to predict credit defaults for the state of Minnesota. And the results of these efforts saved $5 million for the Minnesota government, or could save that money, resulting in consumers being better with their spending. I'd love to talk in depth about this. Are there certain parts of a data science workflow that would be interesting for you for this interview? Would you like me to walk you through all the steps? It's always great during interviews to ask questions back to the interviewer. The reason I say start at this high level view and then ask a question like that is, otherwise you might say, sure, here's a data science project. And you start talking, and before you know it, 15 minutes have gone by and you've explained everything A to Z. And maybe your interview is only 30 to 45 minutes, and it could be great, but the recruiter probably has a lot of questions for you. So to reiterate, start brevity with your answer. Ask a question if you'd like them to have you go more in depth. And then, since you're practicing and reviewing those projects, you can pick any of the topics, any of the sections to go more in depth.
Great. And one of the questions that we just got in the chat, and I encourage more of you that are here joining us today to submit your questions, because this is for you guys. This is your time and opportunity to ask a data scientist about anything related to portfolios. So I encourage you. And so one of the questions that we just got is back to projects. What kind of projects are good for portfolios? Solo developed projects or group projects? What would be more preferred? Or what are the pros and cons of doing either?
So today, with a lot of undergrad, master's, and PhD programs, research is no longer solo, right? It's become group efforts where a lot of published papers are 3, 4, 5, 10 people, and so forth. So that could beg the question, should portfolio projects be only solo or developed as a group? On the one hand, solo projects are fantastic because you have the opportunity to grow and build out the entire project A to Z. You're gaining a lot of experience as you're failing and then succeeding throughout that project. So you have all those capabilities. A group project is also great because you could do more advanced things in your limited time. So if you're thinking of, I want to create an app, right? And you're the machine learning expert building into the app and helping with the dashboard and the API, but then you have a designer and then you have a full stack engineer. I think a group project could be great. It's important that you explain your role and the different roles of the team members so that it showcases to that recruiter, oh, this person also works on teams. They're good at project managing. Perhaps they work in an agile framework. They've worked with product. So group projects could be very helpful for you. Particularly in Springboard, the projects are majority solo, so it is you working to build your portfolio. But I do encourage students to take on Kaggle competitions or go to hackathons or continue to upskill their talents.
Great. So the answer that you just gave kind of segued into a question that I wanted to ask. So what would wanting to move into data science and to ultimately become a data scientist, you have to get started somewhere. And if you are relatively new or just getting started out in your journey, how would you recommend someone gain experience or even develop some projects to put in their portfolio if they're not a part of a boot camp or an online course or anything? How would you recommend someone go about getting started with that?
I think that's a great question. And of course, naturally, the plug would be there are great boot camps like Springboard. So, of course, you can check that out. But even if you're just getting started or you've already gone through another program and you want to accelerate your learning, my number one advice is to work with more and more data sets. So, whether that's from Kaggle, whether that's from the UCI machine learning repository, wherever you're going, setting a goal for yourself, right? In your after work hours, one new data set a week. Let me try to do that analysis. Let me successfully build something from this. If you're not working with these data sets, if you're not choosing real world applications, you're not building your portfolio. So the converse of that is if you are using these data sets, you are building your portfolio. And that's the key. Even in the beginning, if every data set is like for you only, a little bit of code and a couple of visualizations, the more you do it, the better you will become. The more you'll practice different lines of code, and each data set you could say, let me add in one more thing. Let me try one more new thing to gain that experience.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And so I don't have any more questions for you. So I guess we'll leave it open to the Q&A and chat for anyone here today to send us their questions that they have. And we can stick around for a couple more minutes. And if not, then we can sign off. But while we're waiting, so if anyone here today is looking to get started in data science and wanting to gain some more experience, have some of the mentorship, someone like David to help answer their questions and give them some sort of career navigation, or even having one of our career coaches at hand, I would definitely encourage you to check out our data science career track here at Springboard. It's for students who are looking to upskill or change careers completely, gain the hard and soft skills, portfolio, resume, and confidence necessary to exceed within data science and have a really high impact in their new role. It's totally online and a self-paced course, and most students complete the course in about 6 months. And the one thing that I want to really enforce with it is that you really do get the hands-on experience in data science, because the curriculum is very project-based and you can work with your mentor to bridge the gap between what it is that you're learning and the actual practical application. And so that way, when you go to interviews or even in a new role, you're ready to just hit the ground running. So for anyone interested in learning more and even applying for our upcoming cohort, I'll go ahead and put the link to do so in the chat. And it looks like one of the questions we just received is from Jonathan. Hi, Jonathan. So Jonathan shared that he has a history as a software engineer and learning about data science and taking courses. How do I leverage this to showcase on my resume to get an interview?
That's a great question. So it sounds like you've worked in the technical profession, you're doing software in a capacity, and you've taken some data science courses, perhaps online or through other programs. If you've done it specifically through a program or a certificate, I recommend you add that to your education section on your resume. So that's showcasing there. I also encourage students to always have a technology skills section on your resume. It's a couple lines. You could always have them where, one line is data, one line is coding, one line is design, depending on what tools of the trade you're using. So if you started to work with Python or R or Anaconda or any specific data science tools, you could have a technology skills section with a line that says data science, and you label them out. That's a great way to start building that for you. And even on LinkedIn, I know they have the skills section where you could also type those and get endorsements from colleagues of yours in the industry. That's very helpful for you. Thanks for that question, Jonathan.
And another one that we just got from Megan is, are there any resources for learning how to use GitHub, or how would you get started with that?
Sure, that's a great question. So GitHub is, it's become the golden source of managing code and organizing projects, not just for data scientists, but for all engineers in the past 10 years. And to use this system, there's a lot of resources out there. The number one getting started resource I could recommend is Github Learn. So there's actually a link, and we can share some of these after for you. GitHub's created some free online learning called Github Learn, and it lets you self-pace through several of the components of their site to see how you can do version control. Even beyond that, the Git language, so GitHub hosts the Git language, that version control. It's all based off a site called Git SCM. So we'll share that link with you as well on Git SCM. They have a free book online that explains all the concepts of Git and how to do that version control. I think those are two great resources to get you started.
Awesome. And a question from Mark is it more important to have completely unique data or working with a data set in a unique way to stand out? Which is better?
Okay, so great. That's a great question here. I'm just reading through it. So to have completely unique data or working with a data set in a unique way. I think both are interesting. It's important to know that your data needs to be comprehensive enough to do a full capstone. That's why, for example, with the Springboard data science career track, when I work with students, right out of the gate, we start planning ideas for your capstone, and we take several weeks where you're constantly thinking about this so that we get the right data set with your skills to do a capstone project. So unique data could be interesting. You just want to make sure there's enough variables, enough scope to it to do a full project. Of course, in the age of Kaggle now, everyone is interested in working with these data sets, and sometimes you'll see, oh, hundreds of people have worked with these data sets, and they've shared their code even on the Kaggle website. And it begs the question for you, if everyone's done it and it's already available, why should I do it? What value is it for me? I mean, a recruiter might just roll their eyes. I don't think so. I think they've been done, but guess what? You haven't done those. You haven't worked with that data set. You haven't built that code yet. So you're going to get all the tons of experience working there. Again, with a mentor, you would make sure that it's a comprehensive enough data set to do a full capstone project.
Thank you for that. I hope that helped answer your question, Mark. Another question we got is, what are your favorite resources for getting help when you run into a wall, like problems in handling a strange data set, having weird code errors, or running tests and getting odd results?
I think one thing that a lot of people think is when you're in the industry, it must mean you know everything. But the truth is, every day is a learning day. Every day you're learning better ways to work with data, better ways to do analysis, new tools to help you be more successful. When you're trying to learn and improve, a mentor could be a great resource. And beyond that, one of the best websites out there that supports you, and all industry professionals really love this website because you can ask questions and get responses, and it's called Stack Overflow. So if you haven't heard yet of Stack Overflow, it's a fantastic website. Very similar to Reddit, if you will, with up and down votes, and you can ask questions and get answers. And of course, I have even myself, I have mentors and people I can reach out to when I have questions. But sometimes I'm like, hey, let me ask the internet. Let's ask Stack Overflow and see what is returned.
Great. And another question, we'll just take a few more to be sensitive to everyone's time. And so one of the questions we just got from Cheryl is, how do we find projects open to collaboration outside of Kaggle? But even for Kaggle, what's the best way to team with others who are strangers?
One thing that's great about the engineering world is people are very open to help each other out. If you find someone's project that you find very interesting on GitHub, everyone's emails are there. You could email over a person and say, hey, I thought this project was interesting. Can I get involved? Or I'm looking to do something similar. A lot of professors and teachers have their projects there. All the open source initiatives are there. You can get involved with them as well. To further collaborate and build out your skills, of course, there's a lot of code websites like Coder Wars that can help you increase your proficiency. If you're looking to get involved with projects, I do recommend students to also check out Hacker Noon. Sorry, it's not Hacker Noon. That's actually a great blog website, but Hacker Earth, and I'll share that link after. So Hacker Earth is a great website where you can take your coding abilities and use it for good. So it's, you get to work with nonprofits and organizations and do hackathons, if you will, and coder challenges like you would on Kaggle, but rather than there being money prizes and things you can win in corporations, it's all focused on nonprofits, and then these projects can become part of your portfolio. So I really recommend Hacker Earth.
Awesome. And one of the last couple questions is, what is the most difficult part during a data science project? And to be more specific, what is usually the part that takes the most time, most of the time, to be dealt with?
Sure. So during data science projects, there are tons of things you can work on, and depending on the project, the scope is going to naturally be different for each and every project. But overall, usually the part that takes the longest time is cleaning and organizing data. It's a common belief that data is handed magically perfect to you and you can just feed it into a machine learning algorithm and do magic. But the truth is most data is not structured. There's a lot of things and a lot of people to talk with to improve it over time. So traditionally, that's been the area that takes a lot of work and a lot of structure in the code. Some of the newer algorithms coming out today can disregard a lot of cleaning methods and are quite successful, but it still requires supervision of data scientists like yourself and myself to make sure everything is accurate. And how much time will that be? It's very dependent on your project, right? It could be a couple weeks or a couple days for a project to do that. Or if you're working for a big company or a big startup, you might be on an initiative of data cleaning and data engineering. It takes 3 to 6 months, and you're in a team of 10 people, and you're working through billions and trillions of transactions and just doing that for months and months with other projects. So it definitely depends on the scope.
Awesome. And the last question that we'll take today is circling back away from projects and back to resumes. Should we include career objectives in our resume? If so, what would be a great example of a data science career objective?
I completely believe you should have a career objective on your resume. And it's basically like right after your name and your phone number, your email, right under there should be your career objective. That should be the first thing before professional experience, before education, before anything should be your objective. It should ideally be 1 to 2 sentences, pretty short and succinct. And an example off the fly right now would be something like to work as a data scientist in a cross-functional team where projects include cleaning massive data sets, creating dashboards that display metrics, and working with advanced machine learning to support client end goals. Something like that, a sentence or 2 sentences. You could change what those different descriptor words are in relation to your experience and what you're looking to accomplish.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, David. I hope that answered your question, and I hope everyone here got all of their questions answered. With that, we'll sign off. I wanted to thank you, David, so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me today and answer some questions around building a portfolio that helps you stand out to aspiring data scientists. So thank you so much. And is there any last sort of like words of wisdom or thoughts that you'd like to share with everyone who's here today?
For any of you here today who are looking to embark on a career in data science, I'll let you know it is possible. You can do it and you can be successful. It's about you putting in the time and studying and having that structure so you're successful. If you're someone who's looking to start today and learn more, I have on GitHub a link of my data science resources, which I'm pasting in the chat. You could always check out there and see lots of things on Git and data sets and project guidelines and textbooks and things like those. You could, of course, check out a program like Springboard, which I've been a mentor now for over a year, supporting students to get fantastic jobs all over the United States and Europe. So really here to be a resource for you and excited for you as you are each beginning your journey, whether that's reskilling or upskilling.
Great. Thank you so much, David. And thank you, everyone who joined us today. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.